Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are getting under the hood and talking all about car transmissions. If you've ever felt like you're drowning in an alphabet soup of MT, AT, AMT, CVT, and DCT, well, you are definitely in the right place. We're going to break down what these things actually do and how they get the power from the engine to the wheels.
All right, so first things first, why do we even need a transmission in the first place? Why not just connect the engine straight to the wheels? Well, think about the gears on a bicycle. Your car's engine has a sweet spot, a pretty narrow range of speeds where it's running happily and efficiently. But your wheels need to go from 0 all the way up to highway speeds. So the transmission is the magic box in the middle that lets the engine stay in its happy place while the wheels do all the hard work.
And that's exactly where the transmission comes in. It's the essential middleman. It changes the gear ratio, giving you all that grunt you need to get going from a stoplight, and then it shifts up to higher gears so you can cruise down the highway without the engine screaming. And maybe most importantly, it lets you disconnect the engine from the wheels. That's why you can sit at a red light with the engine still running.
So let's start where it all began, with the original solution to this whole puzzle, the classic manual transmission. You know this one, right? The classic stick shift. It really is a three-step dance. First, you push in the clutch pedal with your foot, which disconnects the engine's power. Then you use the shifter to physically select the gear you want. And finally, you ease off the clutch to reconnect the power and send it to the wheels. You and only you are in total, direct mechanical control. So yeah, there are some really clear pros and cons here. The upside? You get complete control, which is amazing for performance driving or if you're doing any serious off-roading. They're also usually super reliable and way easier to fix. But on the other hand, it definitely takes some practice to get good at it, and driving in stop-and-go traffic can be a real workout for your left leg. You can imagine, all that work with the clutch got people thinking. There's gotta be an easier way, right? The first big idea was, what if we could just get rid of that third pedal?
And that brings us to the first attempt at this, called the Intelligent Manual Transmission, or IMT. The idea was pretty clever, really. You take a normal manual gearbox, but you have the car manage the clutch all by itself. So with an IMT, you are still the one moving the gear lever, deciding when it's time to shift, but behind the scenes, a whole bunch of sensors and little motors are doing that fancy footwork on the clutch for you. You don't even have to take your foot off the gas. The main catch? Since it's a computer trying to be as smooth as a human, sometimes the shifts, well, they aren't quite perfect.
Okay, and this is a key difference you need to know. With an IMT, you are still shifting. The next step up the evolutionary ladder is the automated manual transmission, or AMT. This system takes over everything, both the clutch and the actual gear shifting. An AMT is basically a manual transmission with a robot brain. The car is literally watching its own RPMs. When it hits the right speed, it sends a signal to its little robotic arms, the actuators, to work the clutch and shift the gear, all without you having to do a thing. So why get an AMT? Well, the big draw is convenience without breaking the bank. And they're often fantastic on gas. The downside is that the driving experience can feel a little clunky. The shifts can sometimes be jerky, and trust me, it can be a little unnerving when the car decides to shift up just as you're pulling out to pass someone. So those were all really smart ways to build on top of a manual gearbox. But the real game changer, the true revolution, came from a system that was designed from day one to be completely automatic. And that brings us to the good old traditional automatic transmission, or AT. The big difference here is that instead of a clutch that physically clamps and unclamps, it uses something called a torque converter. The best way to picture it is to imagine two fans facing each other. When one fan spins, the air it pushes makes the other fan start to spin. It's a fluid connection. This lets the engine run smoothly even when the wheels are stopped, and it works with a super complex set of gears to give you those smooth, automatic shifts. And you can see why these became so popular, right? It's literally set it and forget it driving. You just put it in drive and go. It doesn't get any easier or more comfortable. But all that smooth convenience comes with a catch. These systems are incredibly complex, making them expensive to fix, and they generally aren't quite as fuel efficient as the other types we've talked about.
Okay, so we've talked about transmissions with gears and robots that shift gears for us. But what if I told you there's a transmission with no gears at all?
That's the mind-bending concept behind the continuously variable transmission, or CVT. Not 4, 5, or even 10 gears. We're talking about a theoretically infinite number of gear ratios.
So how is that even possible? Well, instead of a bunch of interlocking gears, a CVT has a strong steel belt running between two pulleys that can change their shape. One pulley gets power from the engine, the other sends it to the wheels. By making the sides of the pulleys move closer or farther apart, the belt can ride higher or lower, smoothly changing the ratio. It means a computer can find the absolute perfect gear ratio for any speed, delivering power in one long, seamless wave of acceleration.
And what you get is just the smoothest ride imaginable. You never feel a gear change. Because the engine is always running at its most efficient speed, you get amazing fuel economy. The trade-offs? They're not built for tough off-road conditions. And you know that feeling where you downshift to let the engine help slow you down? Yeah, you don't really get that here.
All right, comfort is great. Efficiency is smart, but what about raw speed? What if you want the convenience of an automatic but the blistering performance of a manual?
There's a line in our source material that just says it all. Lightning-fast gear changes that a pure manual just can't match. This is where things get really cool. And it brings us to the dual-clutch transmission, or DCT. Seriously, the way these things work is just pure genius. Imagine you have two separate manual gearboxes in one. One clutch handles the odd gears, first, third, fifth, and so on. The other clutch handles the even gears, second, fourth, sixth. So while you're accelerating hard in first gear, the computer has already gotten second gear lined up and ready to go. The shift is so fast, it's practically instantaneous. It's just the car switching from one clutch to the other. Look, this is basically the top of the mountain when it comes to performance. It's what you find in high-end Porsches and Ferraris for a reason. But, and this is a big but, all that high-tech wizardry is incredibly complex. That means DCTs are expensive to buy, expensive to maintain, and if something goes wrong, they can be very expensive to fix. Okay, wow. We've covered a lot of ground, from 3 pedals down to none, from a handful of gears to an infinite number. So let's put it all together and figure out which one of these might be the perfect fit for you. So, think of this as your quick and dirty guide. If you're a true enthusiast who loves that feeling of being totally connected to the car, you want a manual. If you're just looking for a cheap and easy way to get around the city, the AMT is a smart choice. For pure, effortless comfort on long drives, the traditional automatic is still the one to beat. If your number one goal is saving money on gas during your daily commute, the CVT is your best friend. And, well, if you've got a need for speed, the DCT is the only way to go. So, as you can see, there's no magic bullet here, right? There's no single best transmission for everyone. It all comes down to what you care about most. Is it cost? Is it comfort? Is it fuel efficiency? Or is it pure, heart-pounding performance? Now that you know the tech, the question really is, what kind of driver are you?